Hello, everybody. This is CJ Wiley with more adventures on the road. When I was traveling as a teenager, it was not uncommon for several different types of hustlers to run together at the same time. And I had the good fortune, I guess you would say, to be able to team up with some of the best card players, dice players. I even knew a guy that threw darts, just about as good as anybody in the country. He was a dart hustler. Shuffleboard was a big gambling game, and I met guys that could do phenomenal things on a shuffleboard table. So when there's money involved, I learned that there's always somebody that knows how to hustle that game, whatever it may be. And it works on small levels, and of course it works on the bigger levels too. So when I was running around Kentucky and Burl Gabbard was steering me around, he introduced me to a card player from Alabama. He was an American Indian guy and did not look like he'd be like a card hustler or anything like that. Played a little bit of pool, but that wasn't his forte. His forte was any kind of card game, but there was a fast-paced game called Tonk that lots of people played back in like the 70s and 80s. And they'd play heads up, and basically whoever had the lowest hand by numbers would win. So like an ace deuce would be two great cards to have because the cumulative value is just 3. So then you got the other 3 cards. Basically, if you got an ace and a deuce, it didn't really matter what the other 3 cards were, as long as they weren't just face cards. You could go down and win. So he was amazing. He actually sandpapered his fingertips so they were extra sensitive. But when he was playing somebody this Tonk game, the winner would not deal because it was an advantage for the loser to deal. So the loser always dealt, so the winner of each hand would cut the cards before he dealt. So I would watch him play, and after probably just maybe 5 or 10 minutes, he would crimp the aces in the deck so that when they put the cards down for him to cut them, he would cut the ace to the top every time. And once he got in stroke, he did it with the deuces too. And somehow he could give himself an ace and a deuce every time, which I just, I mean, talk about magic. Basically, they're doing magic tricks, but they're doing it for cash money. So I was with this guy up in northern Tennessee, right on the Kentucky border, and we were up in the mountains. I mean, talk about hillbillies. If they would have made us disappear up there, nobody would have ever found us. So we go in this bar, and they played pool on 2 bar tables out front, but then in the back room, they had a card game. So we went in there and made our presence known, and I started gambling with them playing pool. Well, I ended up winning like $1,200 or something like that, but he lost. Somehow they beat him. And I'll tell you something about card mechanics. They hate to lose. So we're leaving, and we're out in the car, and I'm like, what happened? And he was like steaming. He said, they were just cheating better than me. That's all there was to it. I said, what were they doing? He says, man, I don't know for sure. He said, I think one of them's using a light, which is like a little mirror that they have on their fingers, so when they're dealing, they can see the cards that they're dealing with the reflection of this mirror. It's called a light. And he said, he was determined to go back and beat him. So he said, I'm going to fix it where they can't beat me tomorrow. And I said, really? What are you going to do? And he says, I'll show you. So we went down the street to this little store, and there was only a couple of them in the whole town. This was a small little rural area, but all these guys in that area they grew a certain type of thing that was very profitable. So during that time of the year, some of them be carrying around like 20 or 30,000 like in a paper bag. So they had plenty of cash money. And it was worthwhile for him to do what he did. So we went to this store. He went in and bought all the cards that they had. So we ended up going back to the hotel. I'm still like watching, like, what are you doing? And he said that he was going to mark the cards. But he had forgot his dab, is what they call it, or ink. And that's what they use to actually mark cards with. They daub it, dab it. They put a little piece of, just a little bit of paint on it. But he didn't have that with him. So I said, what are you going to do? He says, I'm just going to mark them with a pocket knife. So he took an iron and steamed the packages of cards open, took the cards out, and proceeded to mark them with a pocket knife. Now I'm kind of watching from over across the hotel room, and I'm like, so aren't you worried that they'll see the mark? He said, oh no, if you don't know where it's at, there's no way you can see it. And I said, well, I could see it. I mean, I know it's there. I've got great eyes. He goes, you still can't see it. He said, if you don't know where it's at, you'll never see it. So I said, give me those cards. So he gave them to me, and I looked through them, and I compared, and I looked, and I compared, and I was like, are you sure these are marked? I said, there's no difference between them. So that's when he taught me an important lesson. He came over, and he pointed that mark out, and it was in the top right-hand corner, and it was just a little slash in the picture, but it was totally invisible to the naked eye. However, once he showed me where that mark was, when he put a card up in front of my eyes, instead of seeing like the, king of clubs, my eyes went immediately to where that mark was, and I could see what the card was. Now, to get good at that, I'd have to practice it, but I could do it right away. So we went back the next day, and, what he did first was we went back to that store, and he goes in there and tells the guy that's working that they were supposed to have a poker game, and it got canceled. And he asks the guy, he says, I don't want my money back. He said, but could I trade these cards in for just some stuff in the store? Because he knew that they may not give him his money back, but they would definitely trade it in. So he went in, he got some sandwiches and sodas and potato chips and, knickknacks, whatever. He didn't even care about that. He just, he didn't want to waste the money. Plus he had to have a way to get the cards back into the store. So the next day we went down, and he got matched up with him again playing cards, and he said, no offense or anything, he said, but I'd like to use a new deck of cards. Is there somewhere around here we can buy some new decks? And one of the guys goes, oh yeah, there's a store down the street that has them. And he goes, Russell, come here. He says, run down there and get us some new cards. He said, we're going to have a big game today. So the guy went down and got the cards and brought them back. And of course, they're the cards that my friend had marked. So they end up playing, and he ends up, I think he won almost 5,000. And they were trying to cheat him too. He still didn't really know what they were doing. There's so many different ways to get an advantage playing cards, but the top hustlers usually have something that'll overrun all of them. And like, for instance, another guy I traveled with was a holdout man. And he was also probably one of the most dangerous men that I've ever been with. He was in Leavenworth, and man, he told me some stories I don't even want to pass on. But he was a holdout man, which meant he held out cards. So he liked to play heads-up poker, and when he would deal, he would end up palming off a card. I mean, it didn't matter if he was dealing or not. He would palm off a card and have it where when I was sitting behind him, I could see the card in his hand. He'd have like an ace or a king or something like that, but nobody else could see it. And he would go in and play heads-up poker with these guys, and I mean just rob them. When he's holding out one card, he could beat him just about every hand. But once he got in stroke, and he knew it made me real uneasy, he'd start holding out two cards. So he'd like hold out a pair of aces, or ace jack, or whatever the two cards was. It gave him a tremendous advantage. When you got two cards, you pretty much can win every single hand. I mean, it takes a miracle for somebody to outdraw you. So I learned an important lesson that day, and it was an unusual way to learn it, but it's how the subconscious works. We only recognize what we're familiar with, and that's what I do these days for fun. Is I like studying some of the higher level hustles and cons that's going on, and there's some big ones going on right now. But once I point it out to people and they're willing to accept it, they'll never be ever done to see it, and then everything starts to fit together. It's kind of like a magic trick, once you know how the trick is done, you'll never be amazed again. And that's a lesson that I learned. Like I said, picking up some of the wisdom in life the way I did was a little unusual. I call it, I got a PhD, a pool hall degree. But just like I've heard many people say, they've learned way more on the streets than they ever did in a classroom. So anyway, if you want to learn more about my techniques that I use to have an advantage playing pool, join me at masteringpocketbilliards.com. And if you want to pick up my new training devices, Super Stroke and Super Stance Trainer, I've just got those out. I haven't been advertising them yet, but you can order those at cjwiley.com. And I have a video series that is included when you buy these products, where you can scan it in your phone. It'll take you to a website, and it'll have, I've got about 7 of those videos. I'll probably end up having probably 10 that shows the best way to use these products to have, a stance and footwork that will serve you as a foundation to build your game as high as you can and reach your full potential. Anyway, till next time, this is CJ. Hope to talk to you soon.